You know something? There was that 99-year-old Eagles fan that you kind of wanted to finally see him win. His team win. You saw that. Merrill Reese, 41 years behind the mic of the Philadelphia Eagles, finally calling a Super Bowl victory. One of the best. He'll win the Roselle Award. Well, I never can tell anymore, but absolutely one of the best football play-by-play men in the world. So I'm happy for him. Not necessarily an Eagles fan, but hey. Of course, I'm Marky Billson. I hate this stuff we do locally where you've got, every sports talk host has to identify himself as a fan of some team. And by the way, kid in Pittsburgh in 1979, once named by the Pro Football Hall of Fame as the Steelers Hall of Fame fan. You won't find someone with more of a legacy, if you will, more of a claim to be a fan of a team than me historically in the Steelers. And then you know what happens? You get into this business, and if you do it right, you start realizing, I've got to cover all the teams objectively. And so I absolutely hate it when I hear people, and you can just tell how biased they are. You're in the Tri-Cities, Tennessee area, and you're shilling for, the Arizona Cardinals or whoever. I mean, why? So no, who are you impressing? One guy likes the Raiders. That's great. Has he ever been to California? I don't think so. And again, soon the Raiders won't be either. Hey, Marky Billson here, your voice of choice for a new generation of Tri-Cities sports fans. The name of the program, Tri-Cities Sports Now, on 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities. We own the Tri-Cities. I'm now on Facebook Live on our 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities Facebook page. Maybe you're watching this live. Maybe you're watching it archived. Guess what? There's no Sports Illustrated jinx. I'm holding up this most latest edition of Sports Illustrated. Nick Foles on the cover. Who would have thought that of all the way, what the Super Bowl would have come down to were the quarterback's receiving skills. Now, who would have thought that? On today's show, Steve Forbes, as usual. He'll come on, head coach of the Red Hot ETSU Buccaneers. 1 p.m. Talk to him about the nitty-gritty. DeSonta Bradford becoming probably the leader. I don't know, some might say Fletcher McGee, but I would say the leader in terms of taking home the Southern Conference Champion Player of the Year. Not to mention the Southern Conference Championship. ETSU 1 game away from tying their all-time record for longest winning streak ever in men's basketball. And they merely have to go to Lexington to take on lowly VMI. All right. Now what about this? You don't get that? How about this? After that, the game to set the record, assuming ETSU defeats the last place Runnin' Roos at UNCG, a game that most people think will be the toughest remaining on their schedule. But it's Super Bowl time, college basketball, regular season kind of meaningless. We've talked about that before. How about I tell you something that's happening in 2 days? National Signing Day in college football. ETSU just got a big commit. Julian Lane out of West Green. Why doesn't ETSU sign more local players? They've got 50 guys from Tennessee on the roster. I know 2 years ago it was 58. I counted up once recently. I think it was, I forget exactly what it was. Anyway, here's the case. And so we'll have on Julian Lane, West Green High School, soon to be an ETSU Buccaneer, chose the Bucks over some Southern Conference schools that were early front runners. this is a positive sign. I mean, you never know how a player's going to do until he goes there. And, you find out the recruiting class 4 years later. Just ask Butch Jones. But I'll tell you this much. You've got a circumstance with Lane where when Randy Sanders came in, that's when it seems ETSU came into the fold to recruit. Probably the best player that Unicoi County, we broadcast the Unicoi County games here on 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities, probably the best player that they saw all year long. And they saw Nathan Arnold, and they saw, the players at Austin East and all of that. That's probably Julian Lane West Green, best player that they saw all year long. Scored 20 touchdowns on offense, 2 on defense. How about that? But yeah, we want to talk about the Super Bowl, obviously. Was it a catch? Did it matter? Not a catch. You kick a field goal, you go up by 2. And then, by the way, wait a minute here. I've got this here. Who told you... What was the player to watch there that I told you on Friday? What was that? Here, let me see. Player to watch in this game, defensive end Brandon Graham. Brandon Graham led the Eagles in sacks this year, 9.5. It seems to me you got to get to Brady, you got to blitz him, you got to disrupt him. You got to listen to me and say sheer genius. Comes down to that. But I told you that was the player to watch, and who comes up with the big sack to win the ball game? Why, it's Brandon Graham, who, well, let's see here. Brandon Graham had this to say about the Eagles' victory.
I didn't know what happened at that last second. I thought they caught it or something because everybody was screaming like they caught the ball at the end. And I was planning to try to stop them for that 2-point conversion. Next thing you know, I see everybody running on the field, and I was like, wow, we won.
Eagles' first title since 1960. There was no Super Bowl back then. It was Norm Van Brocklin was the quarterback there. That was the year in which the Packers, under Vince Lombardi, they played for their first title. It's often said that was their only playoff loss. I guess it depends on what you think of the playoff bowl. I'm not going to do football history 101 to the point. If you know what the playoff bowl was, great. If you don't, that's okay too. 1964, the Packers lose to the St. Louis Cardinals in the playoff bowl. If you want to call that a playoff game, it's a postseason game, certainly. Perhaps not a playoff game, however. Anyway, that is the case there. I'm looking for the play-by-play of the famous sack right there that you would have heard to go to basically win the ball game. And here it is, Merrill Reese, like I said, one of my favorite play-by-play men. Here, who told you it would be Brandon Graham? And what about the former Tennessee Vol, Derek Barnett, getting the fumble recovery? Here we go.
Brady with White to his right. Brady back again. He steps up his head and falls forward. And he fumbles the football, and the Eagles have it. It is recovered by Barnett.
There you are. It couldn't be more dramatic. It couldn't be more dramatic. I don't believe it. I don't believe what I do. Merrill Reese. I was calling the Miracle in the Meadowlands years ago. Yeah. But, it was a high point. Derek Barnett getting that fumble recovery. 9th straight year, Tennessee Volunteer has been on the winning Super Bowl team. But there's some turnabout, I think, that would make me say, if I'm a Vols fan, I'd be very, very, very nervous about one of the things, just in terms of how the program is going to look. And it stems from the New England Patriots. This is Marky's monologue. Look, Bill Belichick assistants tend to be busts when they get their own head coaching gigs. The notable exception is Nick Saban, but even he was 2 games under 500 as the head coach of the Dolphins. So, Miami Dolphins. So, pro coaches doesn't really work out. Matt Patricia becoming the New England Patriots defensive coordinator, gonna leave Bill Belichick to be the head coach of the Lions, joined Jim Bob Cooter, another former Tennessee Vol. And that one really, to me, says bust all over it, even with Matt Stafford, talented quarterback. I mean, I think that Detroit is a place, although, yeah, I mean, years ago they were 0-16, haven't won the, you talk about the Eagles haven't won the NFL title since 1960, Lions haven't since 57. They're one of those cursed teams. The Arizona Cardinals have never won the NFL championship. The Chicago Cardinals did way back in 1947. It was 2 moves ago. I tend to not think that you should include that in a franchise's history. Different fan base. I kind of like what the Browns did. But then again, there's no, replacement Chicago Cardinals in Chicago. But, nobody in Phoenix, no old-timer in Phoenix was, really all that ecstatic that Marshall Goldberg defeated the Eagles, actually, in the 47 NFL title game. I mean, it's the Eagles' first appearance in the NFL title game, if you must know. I think it was the Cardinals' first, too. Anyway, Matt Patricia, though, his defense, we talked about this before, it's not necessarily all that overwhelming. Pats ranked dead last in the AFC against the pass. You saw them allow 41 points to the Philadelphia Eagles, and yes, a backup quarterback, though one that I think has talent, in Nick Foles. And supposedly now, after Matt Patricia becomes the head coach of the Detroit Lions, Greg Schiano, defensive coordinator of Ohio State, goes back to the pros and becomes Bill Belichick's right-hand man as their defensive coordinator of the New England Patriots. Take notice, Vols fans, because there's a chance this can look really bad for the Volunteers in a couple of years. And you know where I'm going with this. To tell you the truth, Schiano to the Patriots makes a lot of sense on both sides. I mean, for Schiano, let me just first say this for the Patriots. If you're looking at this, because I know a lot of Vols fans are like, we don't want Schiano. But the real reason, hopefully, that you didn't want Schiano was the Mike McQuarrie allegation that he knew about Jerry Sandusky, saw something, turned white as a ghost, but mum was the word in State College, and, well, Now, maybe you don't think that's a lot to go on, but a lot of Vols fans did. They also looked at the 68-67 record at Rutgers, and also, let's face it, SEC prejudices. Hiring the defensive coordinator from Alabama, hey, that's fine. Hiring the defensive coordinator from Ohio State, hey, that's the Big Ten. They're the minor leagues, right? They're not the SEC. And there was a little bit of feeling about that. Personally, I think going 68-67 at Rutgers is not that bad of a deal. I really don't. They'd never really done that before since they became a quasi-major program. And they're in still today, now the Big Ten. Don't ask me how Rutgers gets, TV markets, that's how they get in the Big Ten. Now, Schiano to the Patriots, they get a good coordinator. He was defensive coordinator under Butch Davis, back in Miami, 99 and 2000. Miami had real good defenses, coached Ed Reed. Of course, they went on to win the national title in 2001. Ohio State this past year was third in the nation in sacks. And remember, I told you, Patriots this year last in the AFC in pass defense. I mean, look what James Harrison, coming off the scrap heap of the Steelers, did for him. And you got to look at this, where with Schiano had the 9th ranked defense nationally at Ohio State this last year. They were 1 sack off the nation's lead, by the way, in college football. So, it's pretty much well known. Schiano's been a good coordinator. And looks like, as it stands right now, the rumor mill, the reports are, he'll go replace Matt Patricia with the New England Patriots. Now, you can say, why would there be the toxic environment of college football. You can't hire Schiano because of Mike McQuarrie allegations, but you can in the NFL. Remember, it's the NFL. And I think this is why a lot of people just don't like the NFL so much anymore. They're watching college football. More on that later on in the show. But I mean, this is the NFL. Pac-Man Jones is on the Cincinnati Bengals. Michael Vick was getting how many teams wanting his services after he did time as a felon in Leavenworth. So certainly Schiano would not be off the limits to the league as a coach. So can you see this? There's a report out there that, Belichick and Brady, they're thinking of retirement. It's pretty much been refuted. I mean, Tom Brady says he's coming back. I don't see anybody, saying Bill Belichick other than this one rogue reporter a day ago for ESPN saying anything. But you would have Rob Gronkowski, supposedly saying, well, I'll think about coming back. That could be the domino that ends the Patriots dynasty. Sure, then again, the Patriots defeated the Jaguars in the AFC title game without Gronkowski. But Gronkowski, he's coming off a concussion. He's made his millions. One can understand that. One can kind of... I would, be surprised if he did retire, but it wouldn't be unprecedented. Bottom line, though, is next season, Brady's going to be 41. Bill Belichick's going to be 66. They're in the second half of their career. I'm not breaking any news there. So perhaps Brady could play another 4 years. That's a possibility. Says he'd like to do that. Says he'd like to play until he's 45. I guess that might be 5 more years. Let's say Bill Belichick has his eye on Don Shula's record for career victories. He's only 69 shy of it. By the way, you know who the quarterback against Don Shula's Miami Dolphins was? Back in 93 when he set the record, Shula? Doug Peterson. There you go. Now, Schiano, if he goes to New England, like it looks like, he's not a spring chicken at 52, but that's not, ancient by any means either. He's not old. He's 14 years younger than Bill Belichick. So let's say he does become the Pats defensive coordinator. And then let's just say, a few years down the line, whenever, year or 2 or 5, he becomes the Patriots' next head coach. This is brilliant for Schiano. He's not going to get, in college football, teams aren't going to hire him. In pro, absolutely. And pro is higher than college. This is a tremendous career move for Schiano, who once was the head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, though he only won 11 games in 2 years. Now, let's just say it's, in the future, whenever, 2 years, 5 years, Schiano becomes the new head coach of the New England Patriots. Big shoes to fill by any measure. But let's not kid ourselves. It is far more prestigious to be a head coach in the NFL, let alone a head coach in the NFL of one of the glamour franchises, than it is to be the head coach of a college football program running on yesterdays. So Schiano, if this does occur and a natural progression takes place, he could come out ahead in this whole thing that began last year when he was going to be the Vols coach, and then you had everyone from Clay Travis to state representatives to fans in the streets say, no, we don't want Schiano for whatever reason. Schiano would come out ahead. Now, maybe if he were to become a future NFL head coach of the New England Patriots, he'd be a Ray Handley or a Phil Bengtson. Yes, Phil Bengtson. Look it up, okay? Or he could be a Jimmy Johnson and a Bill Cowher. You don't know. All I'm asking is if this plausible scenario would become fact, say 2020, Schiano, defensive coordinator hired by the Patriots, head coach of the Patriots in a couple of years, how are the Vols going to look after they turned him, after they brought out their scorn? No, anyone but Schiano. If he becomes, in a couple of years, the head coach of the New England Patriots. Think about this, let alone their defensive coordinator now. Now, I know that the media around here is rather sympathetic to Tennessee, and the fans certainly are. But a lot of them, myself included, will say, well, maybe you didn't want to in college football after the Dre Bowl situation, when there were other coaches to hire. Maybe you didn't want someone with the stink of McQuarrie allegations upon him and how ugly that whole Penn State situation was. Maybe you didn't want anybody from that background, and that would be legitimate. Okay, we get that. But if Jeremy Pruitt doesn't start to win by that time, how is Tennessee going to look? To a lot of people, especially those outside the area, the answer is going to be not too good. Hey, I'm Marky Billson. Jillian Lane joins me in a little bit, just a few minutes, and then Steve Forbes at 1. I'll tell you about all of them after this. Tri-City Sports Now.
Our Tri-City Liquor in Irwin